Hello, I'm Jacqueline King. Welcome to my sewing space. I'm here to inspire and encourage the new or frustrated sewer. If you were with us on our most recent past video, you know we've started a new series. The series is all about the basics, and our first video in that series was starting with a basic jeans hem. I thought it would be fun this week if we kind of kick it up a notch and do a little tweak to jeans hemming, give you another alternative. And that alternative is how to preserve the original hem. I have two pairs of pants here, and there's a reason for that. This is the pair we hemmed last week. We cut off, we marked, we cut off, and I sewed it. Well, now what do we do if we sew a hem and we decide, you know what, I really like the way the original hem looked? Well, there's a way you can put it back on. Maybe you didn't know that. Or maybe if you have a pair yet to hem and you say, I like that original hem, I don't want to cut that off, I'm going to show you both ways. How to hem, preserving the original, and how to hem when you've already cut it off. We can put it back on. To begin, we're going to prep both pairs of jeans here, and then we'll take our work over to the sewing machine. Now, what I want to do on the pair that I am going to return the original hem to, I'm going to take what I've already done. I did prep this by removing some of the stitches because we have to take it apart. I'm going to make a white mark on the finished fold, just enough to remind myself this is actually going to be our cutting line, and you'll understand that more when we get going on it. So to prep this one, I have put a mark of chalk on the finished fold. Now I'm going to take my seam ripper and remove the stitching that we put in last week. A good tip is to have a sharp seam ripper available to you all the time. They do dull easily, so when you purchase a seam ripper, plan on purchasing more than one. A dull seam ripper can be a disaster in the sewing room. Believe it or not, it will stick and slip easier than a sharp one and can cut your fabric and ruin your project. So pop, pop. All right, and now you may be able to see my chalk. That's just a reminder to me I'm going to turn this pair inside out and cut. This is going to be my cut line. That sounds not right, doesn't it? Because if I cut it here, it's going to be too short. Because remember, we're adding this back on. Okay, so that is ready to turn. Now on this pair, I have already done one leg. I did do one leg on each jeans, I should tell you. We have that completed, and you'll see what it looks like when I turn them both inside out. But on this pair, this side is not yet done. So what I would do is put it on a person, measure and mark, and then I'm guessing, I've just made this up, this is not for anybody in particular. Let's say we're going to hem it 2 inches. One thing I want to say about keeping the original hem, it's important to know, if you are doing a boot cut, which flares out at the bottom, you can keep the original hem, but you can't go up very far. If you need to take out 2 or 3 inches, you're not going to be able to do it because it gets narrower the higher you go. And you're going to end up with too much fabric down here at the original hem. This method is best done on a straight leg pant. And on a straight leg pant, if they're pretty straight, you can go up a number of inches and do the same thing. So having said all that, let's turn them inside out. our unfinished leg. You may have seen this method already, and there might be more than one method to do it, but this is my method that works best for me. Let's just straighten them out. So here we are, the finished leg and the leg yet to do. And I think you get an idea of what we're going to be doing here. We're going to fold and stitch, but where we stitch is very important to make it look as if it was made that way. Okay, and now with this pair, this is the leg we've yet to do, and here is our finished leg. Sorry. Unfinished and finished. Now, when we get going and I start sewing, I want you to see this is not a perfect finish here on this edge. It is zigzagged. I zigzagged it because most likely you're going to have a zigzag stitch available to you at home. If you have a serger sewing machine which binds, cuts, and finishes, you go for it. But it's not typical for sewers to have a serger in their home. So a zigzag is fine. Anything that will keep this edge from fraying out afterwards. But this is what it looks like on the inside after we have replaced that original hem. So I think we will begin with this pair here. Now, as I said, let's get things out of the way. As I said earlier, we're just going to say this, we're going to hem this pair up 2 inches. Here's the tricky part. To shorten this leg 2 inches and keep this hem, we're going to measure from the top of the original hem 1 inch. You'll see why in just a minute. I'm using a pencil because it is on the inside and no one's going to see it. It's easier for you to see. If I use chalk, that's not going to work so well. Now just connect my tick marks. And you might say, but I thought you said you were shortening them 2 inches. Oh yes. Well, how do you get 2 inches taken out? You fold it. And you fold it on the 1 inch line, and you'll be taking out 2 inches. Some things are better just seen than explained. I'm a visual person. I like to see things when I open up a commercial pattern, which is rare these days, but when I do, I rarely read the words. I go right to the pictures. And if necessary, I'll look at the words. Okay, we have our line drawn, 1 inch. And now we're going to fold on that pencil line. Fold the leg right inside. You can put some pins. Something very important to think about when you're doing this on both of these applications, the side seams must be lined up. When you stitch, put your needle in, these have to be right over and under each other, or the look will not be good. However many pins you need to feel confident. This is actually a pretty fast method of hemming. It is faster than the basic way. It's definitely faster than putting it back on. But the good news is You might hem a pair of jeans for yourself at home, put them on and say, I miss that original hem, it looked better. They're always slightly worn and faded, and some of them are very fancy. Some of them you'll have very fancy stitching that you'll never become close to repeating yourself. That's when it's good to preserve the hem. So this one is ready to sew, believe it or not. I'll set that out of the way. Now we're ready to prep our second pair. Remember that white chalk mark I made on our fold? This is our finished hem. Take my scissor, cutting it right on the finished fold. I know it seems contrary, but if we were to sew right on this edge, instead of trimming it away, our pants would finish too long. And you will see when it's completed. I find, if I haven't said it before, that sewing is a lot like Chinese cooking. You know how to cook Chinese, right? Chop, 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 chop. Chop, 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 chop. Bam, you cook it and it's done. Sewing is that way. The prep often takes longer than the sewing. So now that we have the old fabric removed, pay attention. We have different seam finishes on our inseam and outseam. So when you go to put the original back on, make sure you have the correct side lined up. So saying that, I'm going to put the cutaway part on the inside of the leg, and I am lining up the seams. And on this, because it has been cut away, I will put the pin right at that seam. I don't want that to wiggle when I'm at the sewing machine. And now I'm going to go over to the opposite side. Line up these edges. The raw edge of the original hem on the raw edge of the pant. And let me tell you, this is thick. And you're going to go slow at these seams. We'll talk about that at the sewing machine. And now you can just make sure that everything is nice and flat. Put another pin if you want to put 2 or 3 more pins in there. The pins just give you confidence that things aren't going to shift on you at the sewing machine. We are prepped and ready to sew. All right, here we are back at the sewing machine. Couple of reminders. I have put a brand new size 100 needle in here, which would be a 16 if you're going by the lower numbers. We want a new and large needle because in both of these methods we have now added bulk. The regular jean hem is bulky enough, but now it's thicker. So a brand new needle and taking our time over those seams is going to help us be successful. When it comes to the color of your thread, I just match it to the color of the jeans as close as I can. You do not need to put any specialty color thread because it's already on your finished hem. You are sewing on the inside and it'll never be seen. I also want to show you, see if we can get up close, the finish has a fold. That is how the method works, but when you do it correctly and sew it the way I show you to sew it, the original thread pokes out and no one will ever notice that there is a fold. A couple of good shots of steam should flatten that right out. Okay, as we move our leg into the needle position, what I want to show you is the most important thing of this whole method. Besides lining your seams up correct, your needle is going to go on the outside, on top of the hem, right next to the original stitching. So right here is where our needle will go. The hem that I prepared ahead of time was stitched in green thread to make it more visible of where that needle should be going. Now, it is possible that with the use of a zipper foot, you can go under, but I have tried it. It works, but it's a little difficult because you're constantly fighting this fold, trying to flip it up. So while it is not as thick as sewing on top, I think sewing on top is the most accurate way to do it. Let's take our pant leg with all the tips that I have just shared with you. At this point, it does not matter where you put your needle in, and I would recommend don't start on top of the seam. This is not going to show when we're done, so give yourself a break and start where it's easy. Where my needle will go down is on top of the hem, this side of our stitching. Let's see if you can see it. Keep your raw edges lined up. Needle in. Now, what do we want for a stitch length? I would say a little bit bigger than a construction stitch, but not a full basting length. Just a little bit longer than what you would normally use. Needle in, presser foot down, raw edges lined up, and remember our left behind and right in front. We're just keeping even tension on the fabric, and go slow. Well, go at any speed you can go, but slow is better because we don't want to cross over onto our orange original stitching because it won't show when we're done. We want to get as close to without going over. There's nothing really fast about any of this method, but the results are really great. Now I'm approaching my thick seam, and if you didn't watch the previous video on jeans hemming, I recommend you do, because we talked about this little beauty called the jean-a-majig, or just folding a piece of paper and putting that behind to lift your presser foot and help it go over level on that bulky seam. So lift. Remember, leveling out your presser foot helps it go through the bulk. I am hand turning. Let's get our pin. And as I prepare to come off, I'm going to put this in front and level it coming down. All the while sewing on top of that hem fold next to our original stitching. And voila, we have made it over one seam. Okay, check those edges. Don't assume they're going to stay where you put them. And here we go. These are the kinds of things that it helps to put on your patients. One thing I love about my old Singer, when you lift the presser foot, it will stop in the up position, but you can even lift it higher. It won't stay in the bumped up position but for thick applications, you can get them under the foot. The old machines are marvels of engineering and design. Okay, now here we are at the big fat boy. This is a really thick seam. So let's see if I can hand turn enough to get it at the edge. Oop. See, and it goes right down. Hand turn, and it wants to stop, so I'm going to put a little pressure on the front of the presser foot. We can wiggle. Found the sweet spot. Ooh, it's tricky. Don't lose your cool. You saw what I was doing. Lift the presser foot, turn by hand, wiggle. Just tiny increments. That is so fat and so thick. Wait till we get to the other pair. That's a good old-fashioned pair of Levi's, and there's nothing thin about that denim. And we're off. Hallelujah! We made it through. And here we go. We have made it all the way around, and I know that because there's my beginning thread. So I'm going to go over a couple of inches of the original sewing. I'm not back tacking. Pull it out and trim. Woo! We got it on. Now, remember what I did? I cut right on the original, rather the finished fold. And that is because now you can see when this is flipped down, it's going to be the correct length. So to finish this leg, I ran a zigzag around it. I do have a serger, but I use the zigzag for your sake to see. You might have an overcast stitch on your regular sewing machine, and you can do that. And anything that will keep that from fraying out for the many washings it's going to have in the future. So after zigzagging, I take it to the ironing board and press with good steam. Now when you're pressing, you are pushing back against that fold because we are revealing our beautiful original hem with the orange stitching. And once we have done that, you press all the way around, and you can see that we sewed close but not over it. With good steam, that'll lay flat, and we sew in the seam right here where it's not shown. And you can do that on your sewing machine, or you can take a hand needle. I don't think I have a dark thread, so I won't do it for real. There's no knot in this. But you would hide your knot behind the fold, and then put your needle so that it comes up right in that seam. Come up, go down, come up, go down, and with your blue thread, it'll secure that flap so it'll stay in the correct position, stay up, and no one will see it. And you'll do that on both sides. I'll show you. You see that? That is secured here and here. You stitch in the ditch. When you sew into the seam, an existing seam, it's called stitching in the ditch, and it's a method to hide the stitching so it's not seen. But now this is secured. So this flaps out a little. Well, you just have to be aware of that when you put your pants on. I do not, let me repeat, maybe other people do, but I do not top stitch on that fold because it doesn't look like the original hem, right? That's not how they came, and that it is not the original look. So it does stay nicely like this. And let's turn them in right side out. And you can see why we need a size 100 needle. And even a brand new 100, it's going to need some coaxing. But it's just like when your little one was learning to tie his shoes or her shoes, and you had to wait, and you had to say a prayer, and you had to keep your mouth closed and be patient. And eventually, they got it. Because you don't want to be tying your children's shoes on their wedding day. At least I don't. All right, let's take our other jean. Is it jean or is it jeans? I don't know. We call them jeans, but as my husband said, it's only one pair of pants. Needle in. Get our thread out of the way. Press our foot down. Even tension front and back. No, I'm not holding my threads in hand like I normally show, but we're going slow. There. Once you get started, you'll be fine. Sewing next to our orange thread, but not over. The good news is, once you learn the method doesn't change. But here we go. We're climbing up toward our big old fat Levi seam. So, climb the mountain. Presser foot will want to stick. Get the toe of your presser foot out of there. And let's see if this is going to be high enough. It might be to level it out. Okay, lift, push it up. I'm pushing it closer and closer to keep that presser foot level. Put a little pressure on the front of the toe. It's going so far. If I took this downstairs on my industrial walking foot, it would chomp right through there. But I'll bet not many of you have an industrial walking foot sewing machine to use. You go slow because you can feel that if the needle stops and does not want to go down, that's when you have to just in increments so slight. There we go. Turn. Ooh, now my flywheel. And I think we have our first on-camera needle break. That's okay, because it'll happen to you too. So let's wiggle and pull. We're going to take a break and replace our broken needle and come back and continue. Okay, we have our brand new 100 needle in and we're ready to go again. I did check a couple stitches and it seems to be going in fine. Let's see if we can get it to come off. And I will tell you, there's actually another little tip that you can use. Sometimes you want to remember to have it as you're coming off. Just those first couple of stitches, keeping the foot level. All right, and then remove it. So, another little handy tip is to keep a small hammer in your sewing room. True story. I have another little trick here. A handy dandy hammer. I thought about doing it before and didn't. On the inside of the pant leg, in that thick bulk, and of course, be mindful of your table, your setup. I'm okay with mine here, but now we're going to go back in and see if, but sometimes having that hammer will be very handy to aid you in that. And I hope you can tell by now, if you've watched a few of our videos, that we show when we have trouble, because after all, how am I going to encourage you if I don't show you that I have problems myself? This is all about encouraging the community. And there is, as I said before, no perfect sewing, but we do aim for excellence at whatever level we are. If we're a beginner, intermediary, and even expert, we can still have problems. And don't be afraid to show people that you're real, for heaven's sake. You'll never encourage another soul if you pretend like the Facebook person who is always taking the selfies when their makeup is great and their hair is perfect, and off camera their life is a mess. They never show their mess. I'm not afraid to show my mess. Hopefully my mess is less messy than it was a number of years ago, but we are real here. This is real life, and that's how real life works, and we made it around. So patience wins the day. Walk your needle through by turning your wheel by hand. Use your Gina-majig, use your rolled up paper, and occasionally change a broken needle and you'll get through it. And just like before, we now turn it up, pull out that original hem, and that's pretty fantastic. You're going to do the same thing we did on the other pair. You're going to press it, giving good steam and pressure rolling back from the fold. Go all the way around. And I would imagine it would be easier on this pair to hand sew, hand tack that in. And I do like to go all the way through all the layers. You could get it started here on this fold and then just stitch here. That'll work too, but it'll be a really good secure stitch if you go through several layers. Okay, and you'll do both sides as I did on this, and secured it. Secured that fold. Now, on the topic of the fold, as I turn these right side out, how much fold do you leave? If you're taking up 4 inches of hem, you need to shorten them 4 inches, you're going to have 2 inches on the inside. And that is, again, if they're straight leg, and you can take out 4 inches, preserving the original hem. But the idea is, I don't think that you want to really have more than an inch and a quarter here, because it's going to get awkward when you get dressed. Your foot is going to go in there and get caught. But you know what? You do you. You do what works for you. And I hope that I have helped to inspire you to try something new, something a little tricky, and maybe just a bit difficult. Practice that patience. The more I put on patience, the more patience I have to put on. And in the end, what you have is a beautiful result that nobody who doesn't know won't know. It's not original. Well, it is original. I hope you had a good time today. I do love being here, and it isn't always easy, but if I've inspired or encouraged you today, I've done a good thing. So thank you for joining me, and God bless.